Welcome to episode 184 of the Brainy Business, understanding the psychology of why people buy. Today's episode is showcasing the best content from the Brainy Business in 2021. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. There is so much that happened in 2021 here at the Brainy Business and in the Palmer household. It's been really fun to sit and reflect upon everything for this episode, and here are just a couple of the highlights. In January, I started teaching a new class at Texas A&M University through the Certificate in Applied Behavioral Economics via the Human Behavior Lab on internal communication and change management, which I will be teaching again in 2022. And as it's part of the core curriculum, it will likely be around even later if you aren't listening to this right away. And there are always classes available, so please do check that out at any time you are interested. There's a link to that certificate program for you in the show notes, which are waiting for you with all sorts of links within the app you're listening to or at thebrainybusiness.com/184. In March, we rolled out a new version of the Brainy Business website, along with some testing support from iMotions, which you heard me talk about on episode 182 a couple weeks ago. And on May 1st, I launched my free group of behavioral economics enthusiasts from around the world, which as of now has over 500 members. If you aren't one of them yet, please join us. It's a great community called the Be Thoughtful Revolution. And when you sign up for any freebie, you get those within the community, and that's a good way to join too. I also had my very first book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, come out on May 11th, 2021. It has had such an amazing response, including being a finalist in 2 categories of the International Book Awards, being named one of the top 100 behavioral design books by Habit Weekly, and named one of the best new customer experience and design books by eGlobalist just in this year. Thank you to everyone who has purchased a copy, given kind reviews and ratings on Amazon and Goodreads and anywhere else, recommended it to friends, bought it to give out as a gift this holiday season, and had me out to speak on the topic. It has been so much fun, and I'm excited for even more conversation around what your customer wants and can't tell you next year and beyond. Speaking of speaking, I got to be part of some amazing events this past year. I was the MC for the full-day You Better Behave conference put on by Behaviorally, Maru, and Protobrand. I also spoke at Brand Manage Camp for the Insights Association and Greenbook's IIEX Behavior, plus lots of corporate trainings and way more awesome sessions than I can list here. I'm very much looking forward to in-person events in 2022 and hope the world will cooperate with some of the great things that are already on the agenda, starting with a trip to work with the company the first weekend of January. And while I didn't talk about it too much publicly, I never shared about it here on the podcast or on LinkedIn or in my newsletter or anything, but I had a baby in 2021. The Brainy Baby, Mr. Hudson Grey Palmer, was born on August 9th and is a fantastic addition to our little family. He is the best, sweetest baby and is a beast. He has been able to stand on his own since he was 2 months old. He was actually lifting his head up while we were still in the hospital. And at 4 months is as big as some of the 1-year-olds at daycare. He just had his 4-month appointment on the day I'm writing this, and he's over 18 pounds already, growing out of his 9-month clothes. And he's just the happiest, sweetest, big little guy. So that was a big deal for us this year, to say the least. but I'm proud that many of you likely didn't even notice. We never missed an episode or email from the Brainy Business, though one or two were a little bit delayed, and it was pretty well seamless around here. If you want to see pictures of Hudson, follow me on Instagram, where you can find me as the Brainy Biz. I love to share photos there of our Brainy Baby every now and then. And actually, I almost forgot, you can also see a picture of him in something else that launched in 2021, the Brainy Business shop. In addition to mugs and water bottles and notebooks and a wall clock and hats, we also have Brainy Baby onesies available, and Hudson is the model on the main page. This is one of my very favorite pictures of him. Check it out at thebrainybusiness.com/shop. And of course, there are links to that and all the other great stuff I'm going to be talking about throughout the episode within the show notes for this episode, which, as I've already said, are at thebrainybusiness.com/184. Those already on the Brainy Business list got a direct link from me in the email you receive every Friday. Not on the list yet? Simply sign up for any freebie at thebrainybusiness.com and you'll be automatically added. The freebie for this episode is the first chapter of my award-winning book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. And if you already have the book, in which case, thank you, you'll also be automatically added to the list when you get your copy of the free PDF companion workbook. Both are housed in our free behavioral economics community called the Be Thoughtful Revolution. There's a link to join that global community in those show notes as well. Now, as I've said, it's been quite a year. And before I dig into the top content, I always like to take a moment to thank you all for listening, subscribing, sharing, connecting on social media, reaching out to let me know your wins and the behavioral economics concepts you've applied in your own businesses and lives. Those are some of my favorite messages to get. I truly love hearing from you, so please continue to reach out. In 2021, listeners reached out either by email or on social media from all over the world: Israel, South Africa, India, Italy, Ireland, Peru, Japan, and so many more countries. Wherever you are, if you love the podcast and behavioral economics, please do reach out through your favorite social app or join the Be Thoughtful Revolution to let me know who you are. I love connecting with each of you, and it really is me responding. I read all my emails and all those social posts and love to connect with you all. Even if it takes a little while sometimes, know that I will get to you. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as The Brainy Biz, B-I-Z, and as Melina Palmer or The Brainy Business on LinkedIn, and on YouTube as The Brainy Business as well. There are links in the show notes to make it easy to follow and connect on any or all of those platforms. And as this is a best of and top content episode, I always like to give shout outs to the top countries that have been downloading the Brainy Business this past year. Of course, the US is first. That's no surprise. That is followed by the UK, Canada, and Australia, which have remained the top 4 in that order pretty much since the podcast started. India is 5th, followed by Germany, Brazil, Mexico, the Netherlands, and Spain has pushed its way into the top 10 countries with downloads of all time. So welcome, Spain. I do want to give a shout out to South Africa, where I've had a lot of communication this past year, including doing a guest lecture for Mancosa and some podcasts I've been interviewed on. They are the country with the 9th most downloads when you look at just this past year, and they came in 11th on the all-time list. So it will be interesting to see how that shakes out in 2022 and beyond. Of course, I want to thank you all from every country you're listening to. I appreciate you all so much and can't wait to see how things shape up in the next year. And because the bulk of the downloads are here in the US, I want to acknowledge the top 10 states as well. The top 4 continue to be the same, but there's quite a bit of new action in our top 10. Coming in at number 10 with the most downloads of 2021 is Pennsylvania, and New Jersey at number 9, both new to the top 10, so welcome. We have Virginia at number 8, Illinois at number 7, Ohio at 6, a not so surprising addition to the top 10 because of all the great connections I've had to guests in that area, which starts with Brian Ahern. who introduced me to Gleb Sapersky and Kwame Christian, and then Kwame, who introduced me to Andy Luttrell, all in the state of Ohio with amazing episodes on the show. One of which is here on the top 10 list, as you'll hear in a few minutes. So after Ohio, we have Florida at number 5, and then New York still at number 4, Washington at 3, Texas at 2, and California still with the top most downloads of 2021. And a shout out to Georgia, which is number 9 on the all-time downloads list, but didn't quite make the top 10 states of 2021 downloads. So let's see if we can change that before the next best of episode, or what other states might make their way into the top 10. It's always really fun to watch. And as a random little tidbit, as I was pulling the data here on December 10th to record the episode, of the 470,000 plus total downloads of the show so far, 250,001 had come from the US. That means nearly half of all our downloads are international, which is so cool. I love having that sort of diversity from the listeners. So thank you one more time to everyone who's listening, wherever you are. I would love to connect and learn more about you. So please do share where you're listening from and where we hang out on social media, where you can again find me as the Brainy Biz. Now, let's talk top content. I don't think I mentioned this already, but when I do these episodes, I always create a blog post that's linked in the show notes that has all the episodes and articles linked, and then I can just link to the one post within the episode's show notes. It would get to be way too many links if it was done within the show notes in a really long, crazy page. So in case you want to go check that out, know that there's a top link to the blog post within the new show notes that are there for you. And in case you're curious of how I determined the top episodes, these were found by doing a sort of all the downloads on the podcast. So it's based on what you have listened to and shared to find the most popular content from the show. The first grouping is just of the downloads that happened in the calendar year of 2021 through early December, so I could get this episode completed and recorded. And the second list is for all-time downloads. And then after that are the top 10 articles read from my Inc. column. And a really cool thing this year is that there were no overlaps on the 2 podcast episode lists. So we have 20 separate episodes as the top content on this episode I'll talk about today. There has been shuffling in the top 10 of all time since I did this last year, but because those older episodes have the advantage of more time under their belts, they have been able to hold on to those top spots, though the top downloaded episode of this year was super, super close, less than 150 downloads away from making it into that top 10. So of the more than 175,000 downloads of the show in 2021, with now 184 episodes of content to choose from, we get our top 10. Starting with episode 136 on temptation bundling. This is based on research from the fabulous Katie Milkman, who also had a book called How to Change come out in 2021, which she was kind enough to come onto the podcast and talk about with me back on episode 151. This is a great time of year to start thinking about temptation bundling while you consider your New Year's resolutions. Katie's great paper on this research is called Holding the Hunger Games Hostage at the Gym, and discusses how bundling something you want to do, in her case, listen to audiobooks, with a longer term goal that you don't always love the idea of in the moment, like working out at the gym. You then make it so you can only do the thing you want to do when you do the thing you should do to get the benefit of both. This could also be only allowing yourself to listen to your favorite podcast while doing healthy meal prep, or only being allowed to check Instagram or TikTok once you've finished writing for 45 minutes. For more insights on a very important concept, check out episode 136 on temptation bundling for more information and tips on applying it in your life. Next, we have episode 165, when Matej Suha of MindWorks and Inside BE came onto the show discussing research they've done and showcasing the case studies of Inside BE, which launched in 2021 as well. Inside BE includes case studies from behavioral economics and behavioral science experts from around the world who are doing this work in their everyday roles. I'm honored to be one of the featured experts, along with Rory Sutherland, Nir Eyal, Tim Houlihan, Jez Groom, Nuala Walsh, and many more. And unlike so many case studies which don't give you concrete tips and advice for how to do it yourself, these include steps from the trenches and ideas for what you should do if you want to do a similar test. It's a membership space with information about how to do this yourself, something you know I'm all about here, so people can get comfortable applying behavioral science in their work to achieve outstanding results. Links for joining Inside BE and learning about it are within that episode's show notes for you, and listen to episode 165 to hear more from Matej. At the number 8 spot, we have episode 158 with Matthew Confer, letting you know the 3 things everyone needs to do before making a decision. He did a popular TED Talk on this as well, and we got to discuss how things had changed and were the same during the pandemic. A summary of his 3 most important things are: number 1, challenge the constraints; 2, embrace a premortem; and 3, check the basics. For more on what that all means and how to use this framework for making better decisions, be sure to check out episode 158. Next, at number 7, we have episode 160, an interview with Matt Johnson, co-author of Blindsight. This is such a fantastic book, and I had the honor of interviewing both of its co-authors this year, talking about different areas of their expertise. The book is about the mostly hidden ways marketing reshapes our brains and includes stories from Puma, Adidas, Coca-Cola, Cadbury, Red Bull, and so many more. One of my favorite quotes and insights comes from fairly early in the book and says, "If you are led to deeply believe that your chosen shoe brand makes you a better basketball player, who's to say that it doesn't?" This is such an important thing, both for brands to remember with the promises they make and how that can shape the world around them, and how that can shape the world around them, how you can create a better world for your customers, as well as for those who are buying and using goods and services. You can reshape your brain and experience based on what you choose to believe. Pretty cool. Now at number 6, we have the only Foundations episode to make the top 10 this year, and it was a relatively new one, which is pretty cool. This is episode 171 on the paradox of choice. While I didn't speak directly to the author of the book by the same name, Barry Schwartz, for this episode, I did talk about a lot of the concepts from his book and gave you tips as a brand and a person for overcoming the paradox of choice. These days, we've led ourselves to believe that people want more choices, more options, more customization, more. In reality, that leads to a paralyzing inability to decide that can increase anxiety, depression, regret, and all sorts of other negatives for people. Less choice often makes us happier. It's good to sometimes have the illusion of choice for a brand, as I talk about in the episode, but remember that making it easier for people to choose you will pay off. Again, that was episode 171 on the paradox of choice as the 6th most downloaded episode of 2021. Now on to our top 5 with episode 164, an interview with Amy Bucher about her fantastic book, Engaged, and so much more about her work in applying behavioral economics. Amy shared about some research she did for Johnson & Johnson and others on behavioral health and healthcare, and realizing that what seems like the most obvious problem, say the cost, isn't always really the true problem. It could be religious or cultural beliefs or social norms that are often overlooked by researchers or project teams, which is why it's so important to understand the problem before you jump into solving things. Amy shared about her favorite formats for problem solving and frameworks within her book and how she attacks projects. Such a great episode and very well deserving of this number 5 spot. Thank you, Amy. Next at number 4 is episode 140, an interview with Benny Chung, where we talked about some research he did at DeckTech that was also featured in chapter 28 of my book, which showcases the importance of testing. In this case, the study was on reducing opportunistic insurance fraud. Those little fibs someone might make in the moment that don't feel like that big of a deal. Perhaps saying that you'll be the primary driver on a car when you know it'll be your 16-year-old son, so you can save a few bucks on your premiums. This may seem small and like no one gets hurt, but the problem was costing the insurance industry in the UK £1 billion a year, which means everyone's premiums went up to accommodate. But what do? How can you solve that problem? A series of 18 different behavioral interventions were tried, which ranged from 5% effectiveness, still nothing to turn your nose up at, to 74% effectiveness, which means hundreds of millions saved. Which worked the best, and what does this mean when it comes to the importance of testing? Listen to episode 140 with Benny Chung, or flip to chapter 28 of What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You for details. Now, to the top 3. It's no surprise to me that spots 2 and 3 are both company analysis episodes. I know these are favorites on the show and always prove to be top content. At number 3, we have episode 159, a behavioral economics analysis of Amazon. And coming in at number 2 was episode 144, a behavioral economics analysis of Disney. In these episodes, I dig in on a particular business and point out all the behavioral economics concepts I see them using, giving you tips for when you think about those models for yourself, and sometimes reasons something would be a bad fit for your business. For one example, in the behavioral economics analysis of Costco, I talk about membership models and why they aren't a fit for everyone. Just because it's a fit for one company doesn't mean it will automatically work for everyone else. Hello, Survivorship Bias. That one didn't make the top 10, but it's episode 110 and one of my favorites. These episodes help you think about your favorite companies and why some of their main initiatives work, and how to go about emulating them if you determine it's a fit for you. Check out episodes 159 and 144 on Amazon and Disney, which are our top 2 and 3 most downloaded episodes of 2021. And, drumroll please, that leads us to our top most downloaded episode of the year, which was episode 157, my interview with Robert Cialdini on his new and expanded edition of Influence, which includes a whole new 7th principle of persuasion. I must say, I am delighted that this was the top episode of the year. I have been blessed with some truly amazing guests on this show, just a smattering of whom you've heard mentioned in this top 10 list. And usually they're people I've already been connected to on LinkedIn, or where someone else will say, hey, have you talked to so-and-so yet? So we have a pretty warm conversation with someone I already at least sort of know. In that way, I've been blessed to not have to do a lot of cold pitches. And while you may know I have a background in PR, as I discussed in my episode earlier this year on tips for pitching your business, which was episode 177, it still feels uncomfortable for me to do cold pitches. This is why one of my main tips is to play the long game and form great relationships so pitching is easier. Anyway, having Dr. Cialdini on the show, who has said I can call him Bob, but that still feels a little bit weird, or maybe surreal. That was one of those cold pitches. I gathered my confidence and said, why not? And sent that pitch email knowing that he had a new book out, so if he would ever be open to it, now would be the time. Let me just say, he was incredibly delightful, and so was his entire team. I enjoyed every moment of my conversation with him and reading the new and expanded Influence, which is worth each of its nearly 600 pages. It was an honor of mine to be able to interview such a foundational person in psychology and the behavioral sciences, and I'm delighted so many of you have already found and listened to it, so it could become our top downloaded episode of the year. If you haven't yet listened to episode 157 with Bob Cialdini, I highly recommend it. And so does everyone else. That's why it hit number 1. And before we jump to the top episodes of all time, I want to give a shout out to all of my amazing guests who agreed to come on the Brainy Business and share their knowledge in 2021. Thank you to Richard Chataway, Aline Holsworth, Felicity Heathcote Marks, Patrick Fagan, Benny Chung, Jennifer Kleinhens, Michael F. Shine, Michelle Auerbach, Kwame Christian, Stephen M.R. Covey, John Levy, Katie Milkman, Michael Bartlett, Nuala Walsh, Maddie Quinlan, Scott Miller, Robert Cialdini, Matthew Confer, Matt Johnson, Nick Hobson, Leidy Klotz, Amy Bucher, Matei Suha, Sam Albert, Michelle Nigella, Troy Campbell, Ingrid Neuenhaus, Prince Guman, Andy Luttrell, Eric Johnson, Gleb Sapersky, Adam Hansen, Dominic Packer, Hannibal Brooks, Malcolm Brooks, Jessica Wilson, Keith Ewert, and Dan Gingiss, whom you will hear from next week to close out the year. Whoa. That is quite the list when you say them all in a row like that. And that isn't even all the episodes completed in 2021. Quite a year with quite amazing guests. Thank you again to everyone who has been on the show in the past year and over the entire tenure of the show of these 185 episodes coming out from next week and everything that's coming up. I appreciate each and every one of you. All right. Now that was the top 10 downloads of 2021. And I always like to move along and share the top 10 downloads of all time. Now that the show has been around for 3.5 years and we have nearly 200 episodes, there's an amazing back catalog with so much rich content. It's important to share those as well. I'm honored that the back catalog gets so many downloads consistently. There has never been a month of the podcast where every episode didn't get at least one download. That's pretty amazing when you think about it, you know? People don't just find the most recent episode or start at the beginning and then fade out, but people listen and keep finding value from every single episode of the show, even years after they were first released. And while, as I already said, none of the episodes that were in the top 10 of 2021 broke the top 10 of all time list yet, it is a really close battle, and that Cialdini episode is currently 14th of all time and only 147 downloads away from being in the top 10, so who knows what this is going to look like next year. I love having so many people listening to that back catalog and look forward to seeing how this changes over time. But for now, let's dig into that top 10 of all time list, starting with number 10, which was episode 111, Avoiding Everyday Work Disasters with Gleb Sapersky. This is based on insights from his book, Never Go With Your Gut. And we talk about things like tribalism and how that impacts businesses every day, as well as motivating team members to be team players without a financial incentive, and a series of questions everyone should ask themselves to avoid those everyday work disasters that can add up and be a real problem over time. Gleb was on the show again a couple months ago here in 2021, talking about how to return to the office with tips on hybrid workplaces or remaining virtual, and just how to think about things. That was episode 175, if you want to check that out. And of course, episode 111, which is the 10th most downloaded episode of all time here on the Brainy Business. Next is episode 62 on game theory. This was a really fun episode and so important for understanding negotiations and communication with anyone you know. The big tip I'll give from this is to understand the difference between playing to win and playing not to lose. They're not the same thing and result in vastly different outcomes. People who play not to lose, which is most of the population, often achieve what they're trying to avoid. i.e., they have a worse outcome than those who play to win. When you focus on not losing, you often miss the real opportunities to grow and achieve that biggest possible thing. Playing to win often means putting yourself in uncomfortable situations that don't come naturally to many of us, but that is how you stand out and achieve goals in life and business. Again, this was the focus of episode 62 on game theory, the 9th most downloaded episode of all time. And I have a possible guest I'm working on finalizing who can talk more about this topic, which will hopefully be happening in 2022. I'm guessing it will be a highly enjoyed topic since you all like this one so much. So stay tuned for more on that. In at the 8th most downloaded episode of all time is number 102 on confirmation bias. This is such an important bias to understand. And with all the focus on DEI and unconscious bias in the workplace, I'm not surprised this has been a focus on downloads and made it into this number 8 spot. That being said, I wasn't going to mention this until later in the episode when I talk about what's upcoming in 2022, but what the heck? I'm very excited to be working on my next book already, tentatively titled What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, and helping people to be better at change naturally with behavioral economics. This will hopefully be coming out in the fall of 2022. Stay tuned for more details. And I'm already booking corporate trainings and keynotes on this topic for next year. So if you want to talk about what that might look like, send an email to melina@thebrainybusiness.com so we can see if it might be a fit for your company or event. And of course, confirmation bias is one of the pieces outlined in that book when I focus on brain biases within businesses. So if you haven't already listened to episode 102 on confirmation bias, be sure to check it out. Now, the 7th most downloaded is episode 83, How to Organize Your Brain with Behavioral Economics. This is one of my favorite episodes because I got to share some of my favorite tools and tactics for setting and accomplishing goals. People comment often that I've got a lot going on and ask how I do it all, and keeping things organized is a big piece of that. Having a very supportive husband and family is important as well. This episode talks about how I use Trello, the time timer, and other tips for organizing the brain and getting the right things done better. It's not necessarily more things done, mind you, because you want to make sure you're working on the right stuff and not just fluff. So identifying your top goals and then making them a priority is key. I teach a class on this through Texas A&M each year as a short 3-week mini-mester. It actually just wrapped up this past week here in 2021. And it's also available to buy as a DIY all year long through my website and the Be Thoughtful Revolution. There you'll find it as the Brainy Mindset course. So be sure to check that out if you could use support in goals. And of course, listen to episode 83 on how to organize your brain with behavioral economics. Get a little jump start on that. Next is episode 61 on color theory and how, when it comes to color, this one thing matters more than anything else. I'm not surprised that this one continues to be on the top of the downloads of all time list, as it's something that a lot of listeners have asked for and something that comes up so much in branding and marketing discussions and other presentations and things that I give. Colors absolutely do matter, but it might not be in the way you think. As I dig into on the episode, it isn't about one exact color, say that blue buttons or red buttons always work, which isn't the case. But understanding contrast is really important in getting people to take action. So a big red button would stand out more on Facebook than a big blue button. But a big blue button might stand out more on Target's website than a big red one. So understanding your own colors and using contrast in a smart way can encourage action and clicks. There are also tips about the psychology of the various colors and how to pick the best ones for your brand and business in that episode number 61. Now, we're on to the top 5 most downloaded episodes of all time. The episodes with the 5th and 3rd most downloads are both analyses of companies again, like I already talked about for the top downloads of 2021. However, these are different profiles, including number 86 with a behavioral economics analysis of Peloton and episode 73 with a behavioral economics analysis of Starbucks. The Peloton episode shares the importance of phrasings like, I see you, and how you can use social proof and herding to your benefit. And of course, Starbucks gets into scarcity with special drinks, including the PSL and red cups, and the value of their star rewards and much, much more. If you haven't yet listened to those or just want a little refresher, check out episodes 86 on the behavioral economics of Peloton and 73 on the behavioral economics of Starbucks to get your brain buzzing as you plan your next year's initiatives. The last 3 episodes of the top 5 have held on to these top spots for as long as I've been doing these recap episodes. Sure, one was knocked out of that number 3 spot by that Starbucks episode, but other than that, these 3 episodes have been popular since essentially day 1 and continue to get lots of downloads every year. In that number 4 spot, we have episode 5, The Truth About Pricing, which, as I said, has been in the top since the beginning. I've become known for insights on pricing, have a DIY pricing course on my website, as well as a course I teach now at Texas A&M, and do trainings and presentations on this often. It continues to be a very popular topic and something that a lot of businesses struggle with across industries, tenure, and company size. If you want some pricing insights, episode 5, The Truth About Pricing, is a good place to start. And now continuing to hold strong are the top 2 episodes of all time. Number 2 is episode 2, the top 5 wording mistakes businesses make. This also has a related presentation, so I'm not surprised it tops the list. This episode has a concise list with concrete tips on ways you can implement behavioral economics into your messaging, which makes it really easy to start applying. The categories to avoid are being too literal, too much, too vague, too confusing, and too boring. This is the first episode where I talked about cotton candy grapes, something people tag me in posts about all the time still 3.5 years later, which is awesome. And also the Snickers study on anchoring and adjustment, another of my favorite episodes, number 11, which didn't make the top 10, but it's right up there. Super important concept in pricing strategy and sharing information of any kind. Again, those were first mentioned in the second most downloaded episode of all time, the top 5 wording mistakes businesses make, which was episode 2. And finally, the most downloaded episode of all time is the very first one, Unlocking the Secrets of the Brain. This also makes a lot of sense as people will test out a new podcast by starting with the first episode or 2. While some people then choose to carry on straight through, I know a lot of you have reached out and let me know you do that. You listen in release order, even when you're coming back to them, 3 years later. But some others listen to the first episode, know they like it, and then pick and choose through the episodes they think sound interesting and relevant, kind of jumping around for what they need in the moment. In this first episode of the podcast, I talk about behavioral economics in general, a little about my background and why I started the show, and how the brain works. It's a great foundation at any point, and a good one to check back into if you haven't listened yet. And there you have it, the top 10 podcast episodes of 2021 and the top 10 podcast episodes of all time here from the Brainy Business. I'm guessing many of you have a nice long list of episodes to go back and listen to. Of course, that blog post is waiting for you in the show notes so you can quickly get them and links to be able to go down kind of like a checklist. But here's a quick recap so you can make sure you have everything if you are writing them down. So for the top 10 of 2021, we have 136 on temptation bundling, 165 with Matej Suha, 158 with Matthew Confer, 160 with Matt Johnson, 171 on the paradox of choice, 164 with Amy Bucher, 140 with Benny Chung, 159 a behavioral economics analysis of Amazon, 144 a behavioral economics analysis of Disney, and 157 my interview with Robert Cialdini. And for the top 10 of all time, we have episode 111, Avoiding Everyday Work Disasters with Gleb Sapersky, episode 62 on game theory, 102 on confirmation bias, episode 83, how to organize your brain with behavioral economics, episode 61 on color theory, number 86, a behavioral economics analysis of Peloton, episode 5, the truth about pricing, episode 73, a behavioral economics analysis of Starbucks, episode 2, the top 5 wording mistakes businesses make, and episode number 1, unlocking the secrets of the brain. Now, as you look over your list, I would love to hear which ones are topping your list to go listen to first. So do tag me on social media where you can find me as the Brainy Biz and let me know which episodes you're most excited to listen to, or which of your favorites made the top 10, or which of your favorites you were surprised didn't make the list. Whatever your thoughts, I'm excited to hear from you and would love to spread some love for these amazing guests and past episodes on the show. So any sharing and tagging is much appreciated. And as maybe you glanced at the time and realized there's quite a bit left, you know we aren't done yet. This final top 10 list includes the most read articles from my Inc. column in 2021, starting with this one. Have you ever gotten that connection request on social media where it just feels like spam? Does it make you wonder how people feel about your cold invites? Or has it deterred you from ever sending an invite to someone for fear you might look like a spammer? Then this first article is for you. It's called, Here's How to Send a LinkedIn Connection Request to Someone You Haven't Met Before Without Sounding Like Spam. And it has some easy tips using their own algorithms to help you reach out in a way that makes people want to engage instead of wanting to block you. The 9th most read article is called Still Trying to Multitask? How to Make More Time for Deep Work. This is one that's great to read at this time of year when you're planning for the next year. As I said earlier from the How to Organize Your Brain podcast episode, you don't necessarily need to do more things. When you can find the most important things and have enough time to focus on the right stuff, you avoid spending lots of time working on the wrong stuff and bike shedding, also known as multitasking. Multitasking doesn't work. Organize your brain, do some deep work using the tips in this article, and get more of the right stuff done. On to the 8th most read article, which is called A Starbucks Barista Asked Me This One Simple Question, and Using It May Be a Great Way to Boost Your Sales. This article is about framing and breaking free of the way we've always done things. Think of the questions you're asked all the time, every day, and the things you ask other people. Is it actually encouraging them to think and respond, or is it just a go with the motions question? When ordering from any drive-thru, you likely get asked the anything else question and can instinctively respond, nope, without much conscious thought. It doesn't open up the conversation at all or encourage people to get more from you. But remember, if you've listened to the episode on the pain of paying, getting people to decide to buy from you is much more difficult than getting them to buy more things from you once they're in the purchasing mindset. So it's easier to get people to add on things than it is to get them initially to start the buying process. Asking a slightly different question can move the interaction in a much different direction. In this case, after I ordered my drink, the barista asked, "And what else sounds delicious today?" which is a different question entirely and opens up the conversation. I give some examples of how to use this in your business and why this works in that article, which is linked for you in the show notes, along with all sorts of other things I've talked about today at thebrainybusiness.com/184. The 7th most read article is called Dread Going to Work Every Day? The Culprit May Be Hanging in Your Office. This episode is about priming, which was the focus of episode 18 on the podcast, and how having sarcastic messages like TGIF or another case of the Mondays or whatever can shape your experience and make you less excited about your daily work. When you change your environment, you can change your experience. Next, the 6th most read article on Inc. is the first one I wrote for them. It's called One Simple Brain Trick That Can Help You Overcome Self-Doubt Forever. This is very much in the mindset genre and something I work on with people in that mindset course I mentioned earlier. It's about understanding that the frequency at which you say things to yourself matters, and changing behavior can take time, which is why you need to limit your focus. Let's say you want to be better at public speaking, and you've told yourself you're a terrible public speaker since you fainted on stage when you were 9 years old, or maybe something less dramatic. In this situation, you've probably said negative stuff to yourself so much it's automatic now. When you think public speaking or are given an opportunity, your brain has an immediate visceral reaction to the idea. You may feel sick to your stomach and think, "No way," before you consciously realize it. This type of reaction takes time to change, which is why limited focus is so important. This article gives some more detail on understanding how this works in the brain and how to work on your own at shifting your behavior and first reactions when you're ready to change. Now, the fifth most read article in 2021 was the font size on your price tags could be reducing your sales by 28%. Here's how to fix it. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll let you know that the tips apply beyond physical price tags and are important for showcasing prices in any format, whether they're on a website or in a brochure. The way you show prices, in this case, it's specifically when there is a sale, matters, and font size is a big part of that. The fourth most read article is on one of my very favorite things. It's called Forget Brainstorming, Try Question Storming. This is about why brainstorming doesn't really work with our brains and how to question storm, which is something I do a lot of corporate trainings on and talk about in my classes often. And it's inspired by the Right Question Institute's question formulation technique. Learn more about question storming in the article. And if you're interested in a training for your team to make sure you're working on the right problem and not wasting time on the wrong stuff, email Melina at thebrainybusiness.com to schedule a training for your team. Now we have the third most read article called Feeling Unproductive? This brain bias could be to blame. In this article, I talk about bike shedding, which was the focus of episode 99 of the podcast, and how we often distract ourselves with less important tasks that feel really important, but are keeping us from achieving our goals. This article talks a little about what bike shedding is, why our brains like to do it, and tips to overcome it. In our still Zoom-filled virtual world, it isn't surprising that the second most read article this year was Why You Hate Seeing Your Face in Video Meetings. The focusing illusion, which was the topic of episode 89, is one problem. Plus, something as simple as being used to seeing ourselves in the mirror and not head on like many apps these days use. Zoom has started defaulting to having you see yourself as a mirror image while others see you the right way, which has helped a lot of people to be more comfortable with it. This article has other tips for when you can't use a mirror image option and things to keep in mind so you hopefully won't hate seeing yourself in video meetings anymore and can be more confident in that space. And I'm so delighted that my post, which came out on Thanksgiving and was actually the subject line of the email that Inc. sent out that day, which was a first for me and very exciting, called Don't Ask What Are You Thankful For? Try This Instead, is my most read article of 2021. This took a reframe, much like the Starbucks article I mentioned earlier on the list, and talks about how the what are you thankful for question that many people ask at the holidays, particularly at Thanksgiving here in the States, has become something we answer habitually. As you go around the room, people will mostly answer health or family, which, don't get me wrong, are important things to be thankful for, especially in these times. However, because we follow others, we're more likely to herd and say what they said, and we also may just answer out of habit without really internalizing it. My recommendation, in hopes of getting people to think more and take an action that really makes a difference, is to ask, what can you do this year to make others thankful? Ideally, this proactive reframe will help us all have a positive impact on the world. What will you do to make others grateful for you in 2022? Share it with me on social media, where you can find me as the Brainy Biz. And of course, thank you for listening to the Brainy Business and checking out this best of episode. I'm very thankful for you. So that's one thing you're already doing. So what's ahead for me and the Brainy Business in 2022? As I already said, I'm working on my next book, which will ideally come out in the fall. Very exciting. I'm also teaching a new class in the spring at Texas A&M as part of our certificate, which is Advanced Concepts of Behavioral Economics for everyone who's already completed the Foundations of Behavioral Economics course already. And there are plenty of other courses all the time without prerequisites. I'm also undergoing a big update to the show notes pages. All the new pages are in this new format already, like when you go and check out this one, and it's much easier to navigate and use. I'm really excited about it and would love to hear what you think. As part of that process, though, I get to go through the back catalog and redo about 180 episodes notes to the new format. So that's going to take some time. Though along with that process, I'm also going to be listening to find good content to repurpose into shorter bites to use on my YouTube channel. So I can really build out the content there and on LinkedIn and other areas. I want to have more shorter videos on YouTube that are intended for the space. If you don't already follow the Brainy Business on YouTube, please do. As I said, 2022 is going to have a big focus on content there and other platforms, and I would love to share it with as many people as possible. If you have a request for a type of content or topics to be shared there or anywhere else, please do let me know. I'm working on updating and curating content continually and would love your feedback since all the content I create is for you at the end of the day. That's why I continually work to make it easy for you to find and use and implement. And if you aren't already a member of the Be Thoughtful Revolution, please join us there. I'm also working on organizing content into themes there, so it's searchable. And that's where we keep the freebies and have good conversation all year long. And I do trainings throughout the year, either Q&As with me or bringing in guest speakers like this year with Tim and Kurt from Behavioral Grooves and Troy Campbell sharing how to Disneyify anything. Those replays are available within the group. It's a lot of great fun and conversation, and I look forward to seeing you there. Links, of course, to that and everything else are waiting for you in the show notes, which you can find within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/184. which is also where you can see that new show notes format. And as I already said, there is a link to a blog post which summarizes all the best of content from 2021, so you don't have to fish around to find episodes and articles, as well as to the best of content from prior years as you prioritize your podcast listening over the holiday break and beyond. Thank you again for making 2021 such an amazing year and for listening, subscribing, sharing, rating, and reviewing the Brainy Business podcast and my book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. I appreciate you all and can't wait to see what 2022 has in store. And just like that, episode 184 on the best of the Brainy Business in 2021 is done. Next week, for our final episode of the year, I've got my friend Dan Genghis to share about his brilliant book, The Experience Maker, to talk about creating amazing experiences in your business. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Molina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.